We are live, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening. Excuse me.
I said it is 6:02.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 17th, 2023 City Commission Budget Work Session number 4. May I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Resch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here. Commissioner
Commissioner Ronaldo Diaz.
Here.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Stokes will lead the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, I just want to find out, has everyone, this is a lot of stuff to digest. Has everyone had a chance to meet one-on-one with everybody, like whatever department head or chief before tonight?
No,
You've not met in one-on-one?
no, I met with, not one on, like, so we met, yes.
Right.
And then if I said, what's going on here in this department?
Just your questions answered before tonight.
Well, if like, say I had a question about the building department, William wasn't there to answer it. And we said, oh, we'll answer that tonight.
Okay, I'm just curious. Mr. Did you have a
Sam.
chance to meet?
I have a whole list of questions for Mr. Hetty, but it's unrelated to this. It's just sometime I've got to call you up. We'll get that going, but it doesn't relate to this.
But I mean, as far as
I did.
tonight, you've had a chance to meet one-on-one with the department heads?
Well, not with all, no.
No, with ones that you had questions about, the ones that you were in. Ms. Maliga, have you?
Yes, ma'am. I asked my questions of the city manager, to which every department had returned my
Okay,
calls
great.
and answered my questions.
Madam Mayor, just to.
Yep.
That we went through what's for tonight,
Uh-huh.
the schedule of fees.
Okay. I just make sure that we're all, we have the ability to be on the same, two of us were out last week, so we sort of had to catch up. So I just make sure everyone is sort of on the same date line. Thank you.
I
All right.
I did find on the fees, I was intimidated by the 100 pages of backup. I thought, oh boy, I'm gonna read that. But I did find there's a little cheat sheet of most of the way through the document that has 4 pages, which I printed out and annotated, which is the
We all
comparison.
have it.
And that is very useful.
That was given to us.
Yeah, it was in the backup. I found it.
Right.
So that let me cut through to the.
And that's what made it so easy when I sat with staff to go over stuff. It was organized. It was very helpful. For the first time, the budget, I'm not completely intimidated by the budget. So who's going to start?
Should we go in order?
That's right.
Should we just go in
With
order?
no further ado, we'll turn it over to our finance team.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Commission.
You may
Get to them.
Can you
Bring
hear
the
me
mic
now?
down to you.
Better?
Better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good evening. We will be presenting first the schedule of fees. Our agenda is the schedule of fees. We're going to walk through the changes. And then next we'll talk about the electric scenarios that you received, and we'll present those and then follow up with any questions that you might have and receive your direction. So without further ado, we'll start with the schedule of fees.
Thank you.
So the first document that I'm going through is that larger document
Mhm.
that shows the changes. You also have the packet that is all fees for fiscal year 2024.
And the larger one is the same as what was in the backup, right?
Yes, well, there's a few updates to it, so
I'll
I went-
I'll mention what those updates are.
it's not.
There's
Okay.
one minor variation, and I'll mention what that is.
Okay.
there. So we are going to, for the sake of time, highlight significant changes, and I'll stop at each section. If you have questions, just let me know. I'll pause and we can work with the departments to answer those questions for you.
Great. Thank you.
The first area is city clerk's office cemetery fees. You'll notice that there's just a change to the wording. Previously, last year, it said greater of 300, and this year it's lesser, and it actually should be lesser. So it's a correction that has been updated.
That's a Good.
Moving on, if there's no questions, to leisure services, you'll notice that youth flag football increased, as well as adult basketball individual. So both of those were significant changes. That's a new range depending upon service. And then the other significant change would be that high school dance and basically dance has been eliminated as a fee. Art class has increased. And then candle making and karaoke are new fees for that area.
Oh, yeah, those are.
Okay.
And my only question with those are the ones I noted too, was, they're a jump. And this, I guess, would be a question for Lauren. I saw her. Do we have two things? Do we have any knowledge as to whether that's going to be a hardship for any families that might make the difference between being in and out? And if we do we have any kind of like the hope, any scholarship abilities for any of those if that's needed?
Yes.
And I figure the answer to that, the latter, is you've got a plan.
Good evening. For the record, Lauren Bennett, Director of the Leisure Services Department. Just for clarification, are you speaking to the flag football and the adult basketball programs? Yes. The reason for those increases is actually increased due to the referee costs. I don't foresee a lot of hardships, but if there are, we do have a donation account set up, and we do have really good community partners that help us if someone does have issues with registration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. So we have a plan and we'll probably survive.
Yes, we will survive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next area, indoor rec, we have Osborne Community Center fees for residents. That has been reduced by 50% specifically for residents.
And that is per hour, not just a flat rate.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll add that. Tulip insurance, you'll notice overall a 2 to 4% increase, minus the lowest on the bottom, 1501 to 3000, which expense was about 3% increase. And then the next area, actually parking rates for Bohemian Parking Garage is a monthly fee. That's a new fee of $100.
And
$100 a month.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's for residents, non-residents, anybody who wants to have the parking pass. So it's
so,
open to everybody.
Yes.
but what was the situation before? The people could park there and there was no fee at all?
No, so we just had hourly parking in place. It really came to fruition because those who were renting out of the Bohemian are only given one parking space for their apartment. So we saw the need that those that might have more than one vehicle are going to need to park their car in our spaces. And the pricing came out of industry standards that are current right now.
So we'll be making money where we weren't making money before.
We will be,
All right.
hopefully.
And
It's open to everybody.
that's
Do we
good.
have any sense of how full the non-resident part is running? Full, not full, semi-full, 75, not full.
It's not full.
Thanks. I want to thank Ms. Stokes for putting her light on and to ask a question. So we're going to go formal. Ms. Stokes.
Are there a certain amount of spots that are designated for monthly parking passes versus hourly? Like.
We
so
don't at this
limit-
time. I mean, we have 120 spaces total to work with. I think if we get to the point where there is a need to mark those out, we will. Right now, we're just trying to get people to park there.
Do we have an idea of what that number would be where we start getting nervous? Like 60, if we are given out 60 monthly parking passes and we only have.
I would like to see what the demand is first and then disseminate how many we would designate for that, because I'm not sure how much demand we're going to have. So far, we don't have any, but we know that there's apartments where they do need
Mhm.
more than one parking spot.
Okay.
Ma'am,
Okay.
Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry. There was a vehicle that was parked there and it is tagged and had a little boot thing on it. And how much are they in debt to the city for not paying?
Over $3,000,
All right.
over 40 citations.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this together. And we know because I parked my Jeep plugged in next to them, like, oh, they're in trouble.
All right, we'll move to the public works area. The significant changes are extra dump of dumpster fees. That one is a new fee. Waste removal fees, you'll notice that there's been an increase overall about 5%, 5 to 6%.
And this is all commercial so far.
Yes.
Yes. Was the
Thank
answer. Public school rates, that's where
Well, I think it's
we
the
have
bottom.
a update from the previously shared fee. This is an existing fee that was not listed in the schedule last year, but it was a fee we were already charging. So we've added it to the fee schedule to make sure it's.
Mr. McBoy has a question.
I do. Other fees, recycling, so fines, cart out on wrong day, improperly stored per day, meaning, I guess if you put it out early or you leave it out too long. Is that what that is? And
Can you repeat which bucket?
that's about 3 lines up from the bottom on the first page.
The one for $25.
What do we do now? And I'm thinking.
Well, Jamie's here.
Yeah, there it is. About 5 lines up. Yep, no. Right now, we don't charge anything for that. Is that the current situation?
Right now, we do have a fee for that. It's basically, it was broken, it was in another fee. So we're just breaking this out now. So it's a separate fee for carts on a wrong day. Yes,
And how often do we, so it's not really a new fee. We actually have been doing something pretty similar.
yeah, we're just breaking this out separately now, so it's not part of another citation.
It just seems like this could be something that the community might get quite exercised if they put out the card on the wrong day.
Well, then they won't do it the second time.
Vegetation with bold.
We currently do it with other things as well, because you'll see, we get a lot of phone calls when things are out, when they're not supposed to be out. That are sitting out there longer than they need to be because we still need to remove them. So there's usually that fee for having your material out on the wrong day. Because we have to pay the tipping fees when we drop it off at the dump.
Are you nice to older ladies who put it out? Things like that.
That's age discrimination.
I know, but it's a good thing to do.
Vice Mayor, I apologize. Can you speak into your mic?
I'm sorry, yeah.
I was, but, okay, I just hope it doesn't. The trade-off on all these things is always, you know, is the problem worse than the cure, or is the cure more making people more unhappy? I don't know, but if it's pretty much what we're doing already, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, we're just staying consistent.
Okay.
And I just so everyone was sure on the schools, just to make sure everyone understands. We have always charged a fee for that. It's just kind of like how we cleaned up the mobile home parks earlier on this year that had that unique rate. We're doing the same thing with this. So they are another government entity, so they have a different rate, and we're not allowed to actually charge them for disposal. So the fees and the fee schedule for our front load containers, everything else we have, it also includes for residential commercial, includes the tipping fee and the disposal as part of that rate. This cannot. So this is kind of a separate rate just for our service alone.
Commissioner Malega?
Okay.
I'm glad you're talking about that. My question is this a yearly rate? Or is this a monthly rate?
This is monthly. So everything in the fee schedule is basically commercial, and this is the one government entity that falls in the fee schedule.
Okay.
The residential is the rate that falls on the non-ad valorem assessment each year. So
So this, I'm just putting this now on the paperwork. This is a monthly fee the schools pay, not a yearly fee.
that's correct, based on the service they are receiving.
Thank you for that. And thank you for breaking out the $25 fee, because every time I have to send you a picture because somebody calls me and says this person left it out.
Yeah.
That's staff time
Yeah.
and money and gas, and we have to recoup that. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Stokes?
Follow-up question about that. What is the grace period of if I put my recycling out on a Friday and then I bring it in Friday night? Like Saturday morning, are we okay? Are you guys out there Saturday morning writing up feet?
When you say you're recycling, so typically it's 6 p.m. the night before. So if your regular collection day is, say, Thursday morning, it's Friday. Okay, so you would put it out basically not before 6 p.m. on Thursday evening.
And
So you and you talking bringing your carts back in?
I guess I'm both, like
Okay,
So 6 and
if I'm going to a city workshop on a Thursday night,
Mhm.
I have to be here at 6, I might want to put my garbage out before so that I don't have to remember to do it when I get back.
Mhm.
Are people going to be
we haven't had
upset about that?
many issues with that, and people normally when they get home from work pull their stuff back in. But we don't have a lot of carts just kind of sitting out there for days on end.
I feel like for days on end is definitely a problem, but like, a couple hours early, or it feels a little
Controlling.
nitpicky.
I don't think they're patrolling.
Yeah, that's not something that we're like really sticking on. It's more of the material that's out on wrong day
Right.
and people that are putting out an excessive amount of either veg or bulk.
Yeah.
And just kind of it's piling into the right of way.
Won't this be a
And causing an
bonus
issue.
thing? That's all we have to worry about or things like that. Like that's where staff has to focus
I would love it was just carts just sitting out empty.
until we're ready for that.
But this fee says carts out, so not stuff out, right?
Correct.
But
Because
separate.
we already have stuff out covered.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, there's no other questions on that section. We will move to committee sustainability. Significant areas, you'll notice under the advertisement fees, the first sign in envelopes that increased by 33%, a little over. Moving on to miscellaneous fees, the zoning confirmation letter increased by about 66%, as well as the, actually all those increased. Moving down to planning and zoning, location research requests that increased by 100%. And then zoning review of building permits area, the multi-residential was the biggest increase, as well as mixed use. And then if you go down to the additions area, a few lines down, you'll see single family, multi-family residential, non-residential single use increased by anywhere from 50 to 66%. Interior renovations build out. That area increased multi-family residential. That one is actually a new fee, non-residential single use increased. And then down on the bottom, you'll see under generators, HVAC equipment, demolitions, fence walls have increased as well. And then we're moving on to page 3 of 4, if you flip it over. Pools and driveways increased by 120%. And then all of the sign fees have increased. And I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Stokes was first.
Yeah, I had I guess a question for Director Williams. Because this is one of the departments where we saw a lot of significant increases, and I'm wondering if this is going to allow us to hire additional personnel or more outside support to process permits faster, or like, are we going to see an increase in service along with the increase in the fees, or is this just inflation, or, you know, from
For the record, William Waters, Sustainability Director. It's a combination of several of those things. We do have an enhancement in for a community planning position that will be an add to the planning and zoning preservation staff. Most of the costs that are shown there are actually based on our experience over time, what the cost is to deliver the service. It doesn't recoup everything. We have gotten it's been an amazing, I think I signed 4 of them just today, types of zoning confirmation letters, and some of them get very complicated. So we started breaking them out and looking at how much time are we really spending on these, and also looking at the quality and time it takes to review building permits for all the different things that Monica mentioned. Hopefully it will allow us to hire an additional person. I don't know when you're talking about enhancements, but it's already included in that. And what Monica did jump over, which is not really clear, we have reduced the upper tiers of the building permit applications. The lower fees are subsidized by the larger projects because our minimum fee does not in any way cover the total cost of providing that service. But we have reduced the upper tiers of the building permit application fees, and we are continuing to look at that because we did exceed our revenue generation for this year and are on track to do it probably for this year too. And so we're reducing the fee a little bit because we have a reserve there that we need to spend, which we are attempting to do.
So we're hiring we hired one more position,
We haven't filled it.
but we are planning on.
We hope to.
Budget talks. That's part of your wish.
Yes.
Yes, we're gonna present that wish list on Tuesday.
But
I
so
want it right now.
the increase in these fees would be reflected in the budget, and
Yes.
increase in revenues that should hopefully allow us to be able to fund that position.
Yes.
Mr. McBoy and then Mr.
Just-
Jans.
Just to turn that, I mean, I did notice that if the increases across the board were inflationary, they're sort of in the 3 to 5% range. And almost all the years are much higher than that. Some of them are 10 or 11, but some of them are 100%, some of them more. That calculation of, if we do this increase, will it fund a position? I imagine that somebody's done the numbers on it, that roughly how much these fees brought in per year in the past, and if you increase them on average by 20%, does that generate a position? I'll bet you've done that calculation.
Yes, we've provided more than sufficient funds to include our position as well as a couple other ones that are not in our department.
What's that?
We have provided enough estimated revenue to cover our enhanced position as well as possibly some other ones in the department, in the city. But not all that's coming from this. This is to pay for the community planning position, but there are some other enhancement positions that are being requested.
And just, part of what I think we're concerned about as elected folks and representing the city is the reputation of the city. And one of the reputations that we unfortunately have had for a while is Lake Worth is a difficult place to open a business, difficult place to do business related things for whatever reason. Raising fees doesn't help with that reputation. So I'm looking for some sort of indication of, yes, this is a good thing to do. They're pretty much in line with other cities, or something to help give me some, when people say, it's a real pain to do business with Lake Worth.
We have been
Don't like to hear
consistently below other cities in our planning and zoning fees.
Is what?
We have been consistently below other cities in our planning and zoning preservation fees.
Okay. Hopefully.
Commissioner Malega?
That was my question. I'm sure that you've done an analysis of all the surrounding municipalities and we're in line, if not lower than all the other surroundings.
We are, except when it comes to industrial.
And my next question is, actually my comment is, anything that you can do to recoup the cost of all the review that staff takes, I'm in favor of. Not in favor of gouging anybody, but it takes time for what the department does. And time is money, so.
Yes.
And really, my understanding of fees is, we're not allowed to make a profit, God knows, but you have an idea, like, here's the hourly, here's what it costs the city to have this position filled for an hour, including benefits and stuff. And that's pretty much where a lot of that gets based on.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diaz?
And again, most of the fees do not cover all of the cost in delivering the service, but most of it.
Look at the list of things, everything that they do takes time. And if they get interrupted, it takes more time, it's just so. Okay, Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, especially now with local and like the financial implications. So for sure. I had a simple question. Where it's applicable, the fees are the same whether it's owner pulled or contractor pulled, right? Because the
Correct.
time is the same either way. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. All right. All right, where are we done with that? Where are we? Okay.
Finance services. So this one is a correction from the prior year. We actually have a Florida state statute that mandates how we charge these fees. And so we've corrected that to reflect this Florida state statute. Next area, if there's no questions, electric utility. The first significant change is the third one down, reconnection of service at pole. And that one increased by about 78%, as well as one over that, if service for the initial connection, transfer service, that one increased also by the same amount. I'll pause and see what questions you have.
Okay, I think Mr. Stokes was first.
I don't know if Commissioner Diaz's light is left over. Okay. Because it was definitely not before mine. Yes, I am very concerned about increasing the reconnection service by $110 on our residents who are already behind in their bills, and then adding another significant fee on top of that. Other than just potentially being in line with our neighbors, is there another justification for this very significant jump?
Yeah, so for the record, Tom McKee, City of Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility Services Manager. So what this fee actually is this is only when we're actually reconnecting a service at the pole. the vast majority of these are actually going to be when theft has occurred. So these aren't just our normal everyday customers. These are a result of a customer that has tampered with their meter and has damaged something. And then we have to go disconnect that to make it safe at the pole, which involves a line crew. This isn't just at your meter. This involves sending a line crew or someone that can get up the
It
pole.
does say non-payment, and that one I think is we're having,
Because
I agree.
then talks about meter tampering, but we're in section 6 on the service charges.
Right.
So are they the same thing, or this is saying for non-payment?
Yeah, so it can be both, but like I said, the majority of the time it's going to be for theft. If it's just a non-payment issue, if we can get access to it, we just disconnect it at the meter, and then you don't incur this cost at all.
Could
So-
we- I don't mean to interrupt, but I know, I agree with you. Is there a way that we could carve out a difference between the non-payment and the
Violation.
violation?
I think we could. The other part, though, I think, is that the number that we're representing here at 250, that's an average of our actual cost to do it. So it can cost far more than $250 for the electric utility to go make that if we have to use an entire crew and a bucket truck to go climb up the pole.
Okay, so most people that are cut off because they haven't paid, I didn't pay my bill, you turn off my electricity,
Mhm.
would not incur this particular cost, because that would just be a matter, being the expert that I am, of either switching a switch or going to the box and turning it back on.
Correct.
There's no trucks and, there's no equipment involved.
Correct.
Okay, so that would not apply to these people. And I agree, I'm totally with you on that one. I think if that language could just be a little more explanatory in the description, now that we've asked that question and understood it, it would be helpful as people read this
Mhm.
to maybe clarify that a little bit.
But I still have a concern. So I don't know, if there's 100 people who get their service cut off and 90 of them just are fortunate enough to own or rent a home that you have that easy access to, the burden isn't as high for them to get reconnected. But for those 10 unlucky people, is it their fault that you can't just,
So typically, yes. By ordinance, we're supposed to have access all the time to the meters because we own the meters. So if we can't get access, it's because they won't let us in. They've locked their gates and won't allow us to get in, or they put a dog outside that is like a vicious dog that won't allow our meter folks to get back there. It's not just we went out for a disconnect and we tried, but we couldn't get in. So we're just going to charge them $250 extra. We make every attempt to try to get to the meter. That's our preferred way of doing it anyway. Which allows our AMI system to continue to work. We continue to see data come through that AMI system. So it's worst case scenario. And it's, I want to say 99% of the time, it's the customer's decision not to give us that access.
So is it a decision that they're making knowingly? Like if I have a dog in my backyard, I honestly don't know when you come or if you come check my meter. So if I had a dog out there, I wouldn't even know that I'm disrupting you.
Well, you would have all of the late notices and the due date of the bill. So of when we're going to be out there to disconnect it, the date of disconnect, all the past due notices and things like that. We'll try to make contact as well at the residence, and we'll also try to make a phone call if we have a phone number on record. So our folks out in the field in the meter shop, they're trying to make that easy. Disconnect just in the backyard. They'll call into the office and have some of our administrative staff find the phone number on record, try to make contact with the customer. We really go through a lot of steps to try to prevent a cut at the pole situation like what's described here.
Yeah, I'm still a little uneasy with it being put in with the same violation of the rule or regulation.
And I think we could definitely break that out. I don't think that would be an issue to add a separate line in the schedule of fees that specified if this was for a tampering situation, it's this fee. Again, it's the same cost the electric utility is incurring. So we would just be gifting those costs, I guess, to the customer in the event that it's a disconnect for non-payment.
Somebody's been cut off because they can't pay their bill. Adding $240 to their world is a disaster.
Yeah. And they might have a
Mostly, but what
protection,
we're hearing is that's usually not the case.
right. So
Correct.
let's just account for that and make sure that we separate them out and we can treat them differently.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Mr. McBoy?
I had similar concerns about the hardship situation. Can you tell me, with the AMI stuff, my understanding was that we could do remote disconnects in many cases. Can you give me a number as a percentage? What percentage of the disconnects can we do remotely from the office electronically?
So it's currently right around 50%. So 50% of our electric meters are remote disconnect now.
Is there a plan to get that to 100?
Or near 100?
Yeah, it's so
My understanding from yesterday, the reading of the meters is at about 97 odd percent. So that portion is there. I don't know whether the disconnect is additional hardware. I would guess it is, but
right. Yeah. So when the system was purchased back in 2015, the folks at that time only purchased about 40% of the system as remote disconnect meters, which is a separate piece of hardware that you actually need to be able to press that button, make the electric turn on or off.
Yeah.
And so over the last 5-6 years, we have, just through our normal O&M budget process, we have, just attrition as meters fail. We've replaced them with remote disconnects, because the goal is to eventually get a full AMI system that's all 100% remote disconnect.
because that, of course, I wasn't done. You asked a lot of questions. That is, there's not much cost to doing a remote disconnect. That's pretty minor.
Right. Absolutely. No truck rolls. Yep. Absolutely.
And I'm still a little, I definitely am in favor of the earlier discussion. Let's break out exactly what situation, what fee comes in, because I'm certainly familiar with situations where somebody's behind on their payments for whatever reason. And then on top of that, they get this. Pretty soon people are looking at very major bills. We had talked a number of years ago about the possibility of doing a card service where you pay in advance and you get X amount. And I haven't heard anything about that in a while, but that, some way of helping people not get into that situation, and then let's try not to burden them.
Sure.
So what does reconnection at the pole? The meter is not normally at the pole. Meters.
Correct. Yeah. So
What does that
basically,
mean?
so if we cannot get to the meter, to actually pull the meter and put little sleeves on the back that stops the power from flowing through it, our next option is to go to the pole that's serving that address and basically actually cut the wires to remove any electricity from flowing even to the meter at that point, because we can't get to the meter.
And can you give us, we have, I think, 26,000 customers. Can you give us an idea of, in a year, does that happen 5 times? Does that happen 500 times? Actually having to snip the wire?
Yeah, I would say maybe 3 a month on average.
Pretty low.
Yeah.
Well, let's make the language real clear that that's just for the snip the wire.
For tampering. Yep. And then,
well, you said non-payment. I don't know if it is, it isn't, whatever it is, but let's make it clear and maybe separate it out that the tampering, I have no problem with
Right.
hitting people pretty hard on tampering.
okay.
Thank you. I see Ms. Davis's light on, but I also see Ms. Malega's light on was first, so let's go with Ms.
I know that we are very giving, and when people are behind or they can't pay their bills, they can call and make payment arrangements. And I know that we don't just run out and snip the wires. So this is thinking that they're 3-4 months behind. Payment arrangements haven't been kept up. Because I too, when I first saw this fee, questioned Ms. Davis about it, because I thought it was exuberant, but then we went through, okay, now you're like 4 months, probably 3 to 4 months down the road. So there, we are a very giving utility, but at the same time, we can't just eat the cost if somebody hasn't been able to pay their bill.
Right. 3 or 4 months would probably be excessive as far as the whole.
It's in their.
Right. Yeah. Until we get to the point where we're actually going to disconnect them. I mean, a typical customer that's going to get behind, even on the short basis of, hey, here's the shortest amount of time from the time that you consume this power to the time that we're actually going to disconnect. We're certainly one of the most lenient in the state in terms of the amount of time that customers are giving, the amount of leniency that we do give in those situations as well. So yeah, I think, we don't and I think we probably get a bad reputation in terms of the meter department, because a big part of the meter department's job is to disconnect folks for non-payment. I can assure you that nobody in the department wants to do that. It's actually a pretty tough job, because most of the day, or at least the first half of the day, you're delivering bad news to customers if they're home. Yeah. So it's definitely not something that, we relish doing at all. But we are impressed with the amount of time that customers are given, and what customer service and Nanette McTee is here from customer service. They work with those customers quite a bit before it gets to us, and on the actual cutoff list for the morning.
Cost to us, if it does come to that, is around $250 to try to even just recoup our cost of manpower.
Correct.
Like Mayor said earlier, HR benefits, all that stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I'm sure some of the things that you find is that people have cut the wires to they bypass the meter. But that would be something that you would.
That'd be tampering.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
Ms. Davis and Mr. Diaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure that staff and I are clear as to what you're looking to see. So regarding reconnection of service at the pole after disconnection, we want to separate for non-payment. And do we want to maintain the $140 fee for that?
Yes, I do.
Well, I'm just making sure, because we're saying separated, but I assume separating because there's going to be a different fee.
Right. I would like to keep the fee. I will each the $300 a month to not add extra hardship to those three customers who, for whatever reason, we don't know if they have a dog, why they have a dog. We can put all of the blame on them and say they deserve it. I don't think that they deserve to have to pay $100 more than the person who doesn't have a dog or was able to get disconnected remotely.
Completely
So-
disagree. If it's
Well-
costing us $250, we cannot run at a deficit. That's just not a good business.
Okay.
Do you want to just take a vote on how many people would like to keep it at the 140 versus?
Yes,
that?
certainly we want to, if we're going to make the change, we need to know the consensus. of-
What I was saying actually
Commission.
was not to change, to keep it at the 250, but to make it, because what I'm understanding from what staff is telling us is that this is not the guy that gets cut off because he's 6 weeks later. This is somebody that bypassed the thing. And yes, it is our responsibility to make the electric meter available to the city. I mean, if 1 month you find out that your dog or whatever didn't let them in, you forgot to unlock the gate, you call them, you say, and if it's the first time, they'll waive the late fee. I know they do that. And say, okay, next month, open the gate. It's
Right.
not rocket science.
Well, there are people from different cultures. There are people, we can tell, there are people that feel comfortable coming to a city meeting and making public comment. There are people that feel comfortable sending their food back. There are people that feel comfortable demanding more and asking for help. And then there are people who it is against the way that they were brought up to do that. So to assume every person out there knows that they can call our excellent customer service and get on this payment plan and do all this stuff just isn't true, especially if they're already trying to get their basic needs covered. They don't have the time. For the $300 a month, my direction would be to separate it out and keep the disconnection for non-payment at 140, and all the other people who are involved in something criminal or illegal, raise them to 250. That's where I stand. I don't.
That would be mine. And I think before we get too far and talking about, the expense to the utility, I heard that it was 3 a month ballpark, might be 4, 5, might be 2. So I think that's where the number that Commissioner Stokes is referring to of the difference between 140 and 250 is 3 times 100 roughly.
Mhm.
That's not going to break the utility one way or the other. So I would support that. And I think what was said about in our community, we do have to deal with the fact that we have people from a lot of different cultures, and the level of comfort of dealing with government entities varies widely.
Sure.
And so
And part of moving to a different country is trying to learn how that country lives.
It should be easy to do if you had your power on.
I've lived in another country and I had all sorts of advantages to do it. And believe me, it's not so straightforward.
I'm not saying it's straightforward, I'm
And,
just saying it's doable.
All right, I think you're the deciding person, Mr. Diaz.
Well, we're not saying, this is not this is.
Well, the staff wants to know what to bring back for the final vote.
Yeah, I mean, I specifically saw this happen literally last week to my neighbors, and I think you're absolutely right. It's not as easy for others. And I think it's important also to look at this is a line item on a spreadsheet and there's policy behind it. And, you know, I had, in the past, we have talked a lot about our leniency and helping people make that phone call, helping people get on that plan, the payment plan. And it's been a while, but last time I did look at the numbers of the people who have exercised that option, it has gone up significantly. But it's, you know, it's still not a foolproof system. I mean, you have, like, my neighbors are Central American and I struggle to communicate with them because they don't even speak Spanish. They speak, you know, an indigenous language that I've never learned. So you can make resources available to people, but it's never going to be perfect and truly far reaching. So I think when it comes to situations like that where people are struggling, and if they knew and could navigate the system to do better, they certainly would. But, you know, we're also incapable of meeting them halfway, then I think we need to have that option there. For others, you know, the policy could say something like, if they respond, or maybe if they refuse to go for the payment plan, then it steps up or whatever. But we have to make sure that that person, you know, at least was capable of even trying. So I'm for splitting it apart for sure. And I appreciate the comment pointing out that we're more lenient than the rest of the state. I mean, we are definitely a more compassionate town, I think, as a whole. And, you know, there's a number of people who are struggling, and we know our town has a lot of people living in poverty, and, you know, punishing people even more when they're down is just not what we're about. So
I did fail to mention, and I apologize for jumping back in there, but as you were talking, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned this as well, as far as we really try to not make this happen, and to the point where if we're out there for an electric cut or maybe a double utility cut, and we don't have access to that electric meter because it might be in the backyard, we will 95% of the time be able to potentially locate a water meter that might be in the front yard or something that we can basically get the customer's attention by turning that off, and then we save them that fee as well. So
The water.
yeah. yes. Thank you to Director Heading.
And on that note, like, in other words, it's not difficult to see the situation that the customer is in. Like,
Right.
if you can't communicate with them, if you can kind of tell that, you know, they're probably not someone who's going to be on our website and navigating that system. I mean, the guys in the field will be able to kind of determine that.
Sure.
Did we give
So-
you enough direction?
Yes,
Or-
so when we bring it back, we'll see an adjustment in this line.
Thank you.
Well, all right, I
Maybe
disagree with it, but. Record.
But the tampering one that we're bringing up to 500, I'm all for that. So the rest of these, I no problem with that.
Can I just clarify so for the reconnection service at full, for non-payment, we're separating that out. That's going to remain 140. We'll update that in the 250. But there's one, if service for initial connection, transfer of service or connection for an existing account, that's remaining at 250.
The one that's two down from.
The last one.
Yeah, I was a little unclear on that one, but that's when you have a new customer and you have to go, you got to do something at the pole.
That's the initial connection fee, right?
Correct. Yes, that's accurate. That's the initial connection at the pole. So
That must not.
that doesn't happen very often. No, that's not something that happens very often here. That would be if we had a lot of new construction and new residential homes going in and that connection needed to take place. We just don't. So we don't see that fee in that way very often at all. But again, the 250 essentially is the average for the cost for those folks to do that work.
I guess I'm okay with that. And as Mr. Stokes said, the messing with the meters and wiring your way around and all that stuff, I have no problem with penalizing that. In fact, I noticed that our tampering for meter tampering, current diversion for water, we're bumping it from 200 to 1,000, or proposing to do that. But if you do it for electric, we're only going from 200 to 500. I would not have a problem of making both of those the same, because if you're tampering with it and that's pretty obvious, you're doing stuff not cool. And I was going to point that out too, but
Yes.
Sam would say, well, there's a cost connection if you're polluting it because you didn't do a good job. There's that too.
So here's the compromise.
So on that one, if you want to go up to 1,000 on that, I don't have a big problem with that.
That would be the compromise.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to add one more point for purpose of the public understanding is the reconnect. This would not apply, for example, if you ask us to remove the service so you can trim along your service line for protection of the service line. So we do that for free. And we'll work with you, 5 or 6 days a week. So don't think that you have to pay us $250 if you want to trim. We will disconnect for free and then put it back up when you're done. And we'll work with you and your contractor to do that.
Thank you.
My compromise was raised at 500 to 1,000 for the electric tampering one to meet with the water thing.
So
If so, and then but the 140.
I would say just the background on why we selected 500 on the electric utility side. So in our mind, it's kind of the same situation, right? So if the customer can't pay that, if we say it's $1,000, and more than likely that's pretty high end as far as what a customer is able to pay, even if they are tampering. If it goes to collections, it more than likely isn't going to do us any good. And from what we're looking at is if it's 500, that's still payable by a lot of these folks. So we'll actually receive that money opposed to pushing it off to collections. And then, the likelihood of actually recouping any cost is a lot further down the likelihood scale.
So then we'll have to find out the water department's position on the $1,000. Commissioner Leggett?
In regards to that, so let's say you contact somebody and they say, hey, it's $500 for us to reconnect you. What is the time period that you allow that? Do you say,
Indefinitely.
okay, so what if we ran it $500 for the first 14 or 15 days, anything after that, it slides up? Do you think that, because I would just, like you said, water's at 1,000, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, it's $1,000 for the water guy, but these people, what would make one person want to pay you, but not, you want clean water, you want your toilets to flush. I'm just trying to, as a city, I think we should be, it should be the same. Because we own both.
We need to hear, right, the water.
Right, so that, maybe we can do a 750 in the middle. I'm just saying if the water department knows that it's gonna cost X amount of dollars. I think that it looks like we don't know what we're doing when we're that far off, and especially in my mind, like I said, electric's more dangerous.
Are there repeat customers? Like I'm picturing when my dad owned a duplex and one neighbor would like literally steal electricity from the other neighbor. And this happened multiple times. So in that situation, I want them to the first time to be like, this isn't worth it anymore. Or so I'm wondering how often this is repeat.
Yeah, a lot of times just the way that it's set up, a customer might go and set the next account up in a different person's name. So it's really hard for us to track that in terms of, is this the same person over and over and over again? Now, I will say, as Vice Mayor McVoy mentioned, the AMI system is certainly helpful for that. And I think that might be some of the discrepancy too. So we can't see for the water meters if someone tampers or does anything to that meter right away. On the electric side, we can. So if somebody pulls that meter with the installation of the AMI system in 2015, 2016, a lot of times we have a truck pulling up before they even turn around to see what's happening. So we can get there pretty quickly.
Have your camera on your phone out.
Right. So I think, we have the ability to respond a lot faster to the tamperings that occur. And the fee here for the electric, that's the investigation charge, right? So that's only for us to go out there and spend time with the police, and we have PBSO go out there and do an actual case report for these situations. That's to recoup those costs. Now, if we find that, hey, this one somehow it made it through that AMI system and this went on for months, we also calculate how much did we lose in revenue, and then that hits their bill as well. So the 500 is the investigation charge to determine, hey, or if it happened while 5 minutes before we pulled up.
Now, you just said that some people can just put it in somebody else's name. Do we not make them prove residence at that property? Like if I get mine cut off and I just want to call my friend and be like, hey, can you put my electric in your name?
Well, they'll move to another location in the city and use a different name. So they won't necessarily correct. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Just said that.
Yes.
Now, is there anything in the language, because you just said that we then charge them for lost revenue, was there any language pertaining to that in here.
Not in the fees, no. That's basically in a separate ordinance.
But
Yeah,
we have it written somewhere that says if you tamper with the meters, we will adjust and figure out what we should have been due.
that's correct. Yes. Yep.
Back up for that. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And just curiosity, how often do we get tampering on the electric? Is it again, or is it a pretty big deal?
Yeah, it's fairly often. Like I said, we get to them pretty quick now, so the dollar amount, the impact to the actual utility is much less than it used to be. But we'll see 4 or 5 a month, and then we also have a lot of instances, and this goes to Director Waters' department as well, where folks are working without permits, and the AMI system helps us to identify those and get a truck roll out there pretty quickly as well on that situation.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh,
We like
Mr.
them.
Diaz.
Yeah. I might have to switch to a strobe light the more I get skipped over, but
Skipped over Ms. Commissioner Malega earlier, so.
yeah, so we've almost moved. I mean, it's been a while since I wanted to interject with this, but when it comes to, you mentioned a little while ago the probability of collecting $1,000 less than 500. But my thought on that is like it's incredibly dangerous to tamper with a line, even a service line, and I would assume certainly incur some sort of liability if somebody climbs up there and hurts themselves. So I think just on that regard, when it comes to tampering with 24 kV electric lines, I think punitive is okay. Like we kind of want to discourage that. And the other thought too is, do we do things when the people who are working on comm lines do something to mess with our gear as well? Because I saw recently, at least like on the social media posts, I think it got reported some comm lines and how they were left in a way that basically affects our access to our power lines on our poles. So, do we have a mechanism to go after those guys as well?
What's a cob line?
Comm line communication. Yeah, because they're lower on a pole, and there was one somebody posted and reported it was like a rat's nest. It was awful. And it's straight up dangerous.
Right. Yeah, sure. No, we definitely have very good relationships with AT&T, Comcast, all of the other utilities out there. We frequently work with them anytime we're removing a pole and they have facilities on that same pole. We kind of have to all work together to get those facilities off and have the pole removed. So I'm not aware of any situations that we've come across that we were in that position that put us at a safety risk or anything else from a comm line. But I can assure you, if we did come across that, we would work directly with them to figure out. And I don't think it'd be malicious. I think it would just be maybe an error on their part.
Yeah. Or they're probably going to come back to it or whatever. But then on the other side, like if somebody does tamper with the gear to steal electricity, I just can't even imagine like how you would even accomplish that. I mean, the fee should be, I feel like, substantially high because of just how dangerous, like, we could be sued, like, quite. I know it sounds like a ridiculous concept. If you're going to steal electricity, it's your fault, but there's probably a likelihood that we're going to incur some of that liability as well.
I think for security purposes, rather not discuss in public the various ways, but certainly in one-on-one, we could describe to you some of the things that we found. There's some quite creative people out there. There's also not unusual in the industry to hear of people or see evidence that somebody must have been injured rather badly, and you may not know about it unless you do a search of the local hospitals. But you can get injured very, very badly. We've had some very ingenious people, but also some very foolish people.
500,000. I feel like we're all happy to go 1,000, but then it's like, do we get it back or not argument?
And my question related to that, I'm happy with 1,000 because to me, this is not a fee. This is a penalty for doing blatantly bad stuff. It's unhealthy, maybe.
Just get the word out that's what, you don't find out until you do a bad thing, right? Position.
And my question would be, if somebody is willing to put their lives in risk, steal power from the company, are they likely to be willing to pay a $500 fee or a $1,000 fee? I mean, I don't think the difference, we're going to have to go after them one or another way in. So I don't know, but
I'm not sure if this is the record, but we recovered a little over 100,000 in a single case. Right.
that was some
That was very ingenious,
Agricultural activity.
allegedly. But yeah, we will lean the home if we need to, or the property, if we can. But
Commissioner Leggett has a item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there a state
Guidance.
law mandatory, is there anything on the state rules that say you cannot do X, Y, or Z?
No, it's basically for us, we just kind of look at industry standard. You know, what's FPL doing? What are the other municipal utilities and co-ops doing? So
Because the same person puts the dog in the backyard and locks the back gate and doesn't let you in to read the meter is stealing electricity. You're not going up and tampering with the meter or playing with the line. So I feel whoever's stealing from us is stealing from us. So I can't have one foot on the dock and one off. To me, if you're stealing, we have to recoup our cost. If you're not allowing our people to read the meter, you're still stealing from us. So,
So-
3%.
So
Seems like you're getting guidance to go to the 1,000.
I think
Okay,
that
understood.
is, as long as we don't get in trouble with the state.
sure, no,
There should be
we
a
can
sign
definitely do that.
here and there throughout the city. Don't do this with the $1,000.
So you die.
Well,
And you're-
I
I mean, let's just forget $1,000 if you die. I mean, it's just.
Okay, let's move along. It's now 7:00. We are down now to
We're at the water
water
utility.
utilities.
So the significant changes I think have been brought up, cross connection involving a private water system.
Are you talking to the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Significant changes of the cross connection involving a private water system. You'll see that increased by 400%. Failing to test or maintain backflow 100%. So all of those anywhere from 100 to 400%. And then if we move into utility customer service, there's B, if a service is described above, and 5 requires again that utility bucket truck. One is the 140 to 250 similarly. And then also tampering, as you all mentioned, 200 to 1,000, increasing 400%. And I'll pause to see what questions you have.
Commissioner Leggett, like some?
Yeah, my first question is on the failure to test or maintain backflow prevention assemblies as required for violation. So fun fact, I am a tenant in the city of a commercial property and my landlord got in trouble. They said they didn't have any idea. How do we test the backflow? Who tells us? How are we notifying landowners, commercial owners that this is required to do? Anybody?
We
Going once?
normally there is a backflow prevention program within the city or municipality. And at that point in time, they are notified by letter or by phone or by when you set up your account that every year you're supposed to have this certified.
Okay.
So
I don't believe that that's being explained, especially to commercial owners in the town. And this is again, just giving you a heads up. It only happened with my building because it changed from father to kids and they had to update their billing system. That's when they found out that it hadn't been done in like 7 or 10 years. So I just want to make sure, because this is a big thing that we're sending, maybe we could do it when we're redoing the LBTRs. Put on there, don't forget to do your blah, 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 or you could be in violation. I just feel like we have to be able to communicate it because this is something that I don't think is, and that's a pretty hefty fine.
I don't disagree with you. But one of the challenges I have often found with clients and with people that talk to the city, if you stop renting your house, or if you have a vacant lot, you have to register it. How do you know that? If you have a rental license and you stop renting it and you have to give the city $25 and notify them, how do you know that? So it comes under the same, this is why I've been talking about handbooks.
Right. So I'm again, because it's a huge increase from 500 to 1,000.
Yeah.
Can we figure out how to do this and tie this in with the LBTRs when they have to renew their rental license or something? So we don't find people getting in a pickle, because it's hard to keep businesses in town right now. And I don't want the commercial, like everyone else is concerned about the one person who can't pay their rent or their utilities and they're being just, turned off. We have landowners in town who are dealing with rising taxes, rising insurance. And then if they don't know that they're supposed to do this, I just want to make sure, because you're new here as the director, that we're doing a good job in explaining that this needs to be done. There is a fee associated if it's not done. So
one thing I don't know is if we give a welcome package when anybody
don't.
comes into town. That's
No.
where we would normally put something to that effect.
Thank you. We don't do that yet.
But
Still,
there,
Not yet. Looking
So this
forward
is
to it though.
The Business Advisory Board is gonna be working on how to do business in Lake Worth Beach. So this is the kind of the stuff that I mean, that's just a big fee for a business owner to have to come up with right away. And then my other one was the utility customer service A2 applications. Does that $20, does that cover our credit pull? For the credit inquiry that we do, so we're recouping our costs back? Does it need to go up to 23, 24?
we kept it in line with electric, I think is what we just fell in line with electric, so we kept it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, because how many applications do we get a month? And if we're losing $3 to $5 per person, that's gonna add up.
I'd be more than glad to raise it or decrease it.
Well, I just want to make sure we're recouping our money, that we're not losing money, because if we have 10,000 people every 6 months applying for new electric or utilities, that's a lot of money for us to lose.
I haven't been here long enough to know that, but
Why don't you come on up?
Am I the only one? I mean, doesn't that make sense for us to recoup our cost?
I don't think all costs, I think there are just places in certain industries where you operate at a loss. Like William was even saying, we're trying to recuperate as much as we can, but I don't think it's a perfect thing where I just think it's part of.
But this is how many
We're
applications
getting
do
into
we
kind
have?
of a back and forth thing and
I
people
know.
have lights on, so let's get back under
So-
control. Ma'am,
Yes,
would you introduce yourself?
Nanette McTagg, customer service.
How, thank you for coming tonight.
Sure.
Ms. Maloney?
What do you think that, I mean, the average cost would be per applicant? With staff time, credit pulls?
It all depends on a lot of factors. We give them an application. Hopefully it's filled out correctly the first time. But oftentimes we're missing the license, we're missing various things. So that does incur additional time. But overall, I don't think you want to penalize people either. You want to make it even and you want to make it acceptable. And we're pretty much in line.
We're in line across the board. Okay, that's all. I just don't, I mean, we can't afford to lose money everywhere. That's all.
Correct.
Yes.
And we want to make it easy for our residents to apply for service as well.
Thank
Um, one thing that kind of stands out to me, and it's more curious because I know this is such a big problem, is the fatberg, and I'm just really the fats, oils, and grease removal surcharge.
the FOG program.
Yeah. How do we determine it? Because I mean that happens all throughout our system, any kind of choke point or whatever. So like, does this happen? I'm assuming this is for like. This happens on somebody's property. Otherwise, how would you determine that?
These are restaurants and other people's property.
Okay.
Yes.
And we do that. It's not, they don't hire a plumber. We have to come out because it's ours.
We do it, but we actually have the ability to waive this fee if they actually sign up with us and let us know that they have a program in place themselves, or we wouldn't have to go out and do it for them. So
Another thing for the handbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I have here and with me.
Great. But is that, like if I had.
So if you called me and said, hey, we have to continually come over to pump out your septic or pump out your grease trap at your restaurant, we're incurring costs. This is, we got to haul it all the way out to the ECR. It's a process. So it's a deterrent. We want to put that in front of people to tell them, hey, you need to start taking care of your system.
Great.
Secondly, if I actually have to go out there, it's quite a bit of labor involved in doing this.
Yeah.
And we're charged at the ECR when I actually take the truck there to dump it. So,
And
Yeah.
all the way out there.
yes.
Okay,
Couple questions.
well, okay, go ahead.
Kudos for separating out the cross connection with the health hazard without.
Yes,
It kind of gets to pretty much they're all health hazards, but.
they could be.
But they could be, or could not be. I appreciate making that distinction. That seems reasonable, and I got no problem, define pretty hefty. That's a 5,000 fine. Don't do that.
If we ended up getting into a situation where somebody actually had a disconnect into our water system, $5,000 a day wouldn't come close to actually covering the cost of what it would be. So
I support that. It's similar to, not quite as dangerous as doing it with the electric, but still it's not a good idea, and the health possibly.
yes,
On the backflow thing, can you, just for our edification, where would those backflow prevention things typically come in for residential and for commercial?
Every residential property needs to have a backflow preventer on their meter. Especially if they have if they're watering their lawn with potable water. So
And who puts that in? Do you put that in when you put the meter?
we do. And then if they,
I have no idea if there's a backflow preventer on mine. I haven't dug it up in a while.
normally residents don't, because it's just such a small backflow. It's really just a RPZ at that point. But if you get into the bigger lines, 1.5 to 2 inch to 4 inch lines, that becomes more health concern now in that regard. Most people know that own these residents and these businesses that they have this in place, and most people know that they need to certify them once a year. So
That's not for residential. That's for, unless it's an awful big user.
Yeah, 1 inch. We started looking at 1 inch and above is really where it started concerning us, because, if you got something going back into 1 inch, it can get into your system. 5/8 to 3/4, that really wasn't that significant enough to come out and start harassing homeowners to make sure they get it done.
So most of this is going to be on bigger users.
Yes.
Where they know that they're using a lot of water. They're going to know, or their plumber's going to know.
Yes.
You need to have a backflow thing on it.
That's correct. And there again, it's a safety device to ensure that we're keeping our system safe.
The other question I had was on B5. If service described in B5, which is B5, I'm not quite sure what that is, but requires the utility to use a bucket truck. Do you use a bucket truck?
No, but it does say it's special. It does say special equipment. So I think some of the language is just carried through the years. But we may end up having to use some sort of specialized equipment. We have a small backhoe, a little track hoe, front end loader, a crane. There's certain scenarios that you never know what you get into. So that's covering the cost of our labor and the equipment to go out there and do whatever we need to do to take care of whatever the situation is.
So if it's a major deal, like when they came and installed, they moved the meters to the front and ran flexible pipe into the front. They didn't charge for that, I don't think.
No.
But this is if something goes weird.
This is a one-off is what it really, these charges here are all deterrence is really what it is. And it's trying to cover any labor of the utility if we were to have to go out there to do anything. But most of these are just deterrent costs and.
One example
of
what, something that might fall into this category.
We've got up on the lights again.
Where were we at again? Which one?
It's called B parentheses 5.
The special equipment.
Utility customer service is the last one, right before advanced metering opt out.
It's on the screen if you. Sam.
Yeah,
It's on the screen.
I got it here too. I'm trying to catch up with myself here.
And I do say, let's strike the bucket truck because that's.
Yeah, well, there again,
although they're using a bucket truck to put in the water line.
I know, I'm confused too with that one. What?
It's just it's just an resource allocation issue is what it is. Well, you want to know where this would come into play if I had to go do something? A big 6-inch meter, backflow meter, something large that we would have to go out there and take apart ourselves.
I think they're having an issue with the bucket truck.
We wouldn't use a bucket truck.
Right.
It would be a backhoe. It would be.
Like it's the resident's fault or whoever's
Yes.
the owner's fault.
That's
And then
all
you
these
have
are.
to go and you have to bring your special
correct.
equipment.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to do XYZ. We can't do XYZ. So we got to bring out something special, but I will delete bucket truck for sure.
7 minutes of our life.
If you have a bucket truck, I think Jamie could use one.
Yeah.
Definitely not using it.
It's in the mark.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, where are we?
Advanced metering. Or did we get through everything?
Advanced metering opt out is the last thing.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
there's supposed to be we're making a change there. For some reason, it didn't carry across. So there will be the next revision of this, there will be some sort of charge there on the one right below the opt-out. Any water utility customer may elect to utilize a non-communicating water meter opposed to a standard communicating water
They
meter.
have to opt out of it.
If they
There's
opt
a
out,
charge there.
there will be a charge there. Right now, it's missing, and we caught that this morning. So
I'm gonna ask a really stupid question. That's only to the people that we offer that kind of meter to.
yeah. But some people, you'd be surprised. They don't like the communication
Oh, I
device
get
on
it.
there.
I get
So
it.
We would not
Um,
be surprised.
yeah.
You would not.
So yeah.
Welcome to the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so are
So
we,
that charge we'll hear about at some point.
Yeah. So I
No, we will include it in the revised schedule with the changes that you've requested.
just show me.
About it once.
So yes, that is correct. We were bringing this back. You gave this back to us at a prior just utility commission meeting to increase the fees that we listed for this program. And so we basically reflected it here in this updated schedule of fees for electric and water both. And let me find what the water is supposed to be.
Yeah, because you were gonna be researching just to make sure that we were recouping the cost of sending somebody out there every month.
Correct. Yep. So for the water, it would be $41 for the one-time enrollment fee. And the next line, essentially, it's the same process for us to go read that meter every month. So that'd be $41 as well per month. And for the third line there, for the recurring monthly service charge, if you have electric and water, again, you get a little bit of a break because we're only rolling one truck for both of those reads. We move that up to $48.
It was like 30 something before.
Correct. Yes.
so this is if you're offered the remote service,
If you ask for it.
decline it,
Correct. Yes.
pay a monthly fee of $41
Yes. Correct.
because we have to send people.
And essentially, these customers will come to us. We're not going to solicit that. They will come to us and say, we do not want the meter that communicates that we currently have.
That's gonna happen. How would I know if you're gonna put one of those meters in my house?
We will, everybody has one currently. So this is a retroactive, some customers have asked for it since we went to AMI.
Thank you for researching that.
I would be inclined to make the initial, I'm fine with the monthly fees the way you have them. I would make the initial enrollment. I don't know why I'd make it the monthly fee. I'd make it a little higher. Because there's, well, because, you know, the AMI system provides a lot of benefit both to the city and to the customer. And if they choose not to do it, that definitely has cost to us. So I would discourage people from doing that. And make that fee, you know, I don't know, 80, 100 or something rather. Say,
I think it
you
was the
really
last
wanna
time that was the cost of the meter and the install, right?
Maybe not cool.
Sorry.
We've had this. Yeah,
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think the Vice Mayor makes a very good point. Most people don't realize that the AMI system, that meter on your home is carrying data not only for your home, but for the surrounding homes, electric and water meters. So when we lose the ability for that single meter to communicate, it does have a significant impact on our situational awareness of what's happening on the system. It has an operating impact. It's not a huge impact, but it causes those meters to have to find another path home. It takes that meter out of the communication change.
so should that be a little bit higher? The $41?
For the initial.
That's just
I'm addressing the initial enrollment fee because we don't want to encourage people to
Yeah.
it should be higher.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, it's
Right.
both.
It does affect.
It's 80, this,
Right.
oh, the water
Water
is
should be-
41, so it's two different charges.
Let's make it 80.
Let's make it 80.
Your recommendation.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be in
You're
that
fine.
for water.
That'd be my sheet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and it's, I remember talking about this. I mean, on electric, the meter is like, it's quite literally plug and play. And for the water meter, there has to be soldering involved, right?
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of different things
Yeah.
involved in that.
So actually, that's why the cost is a lot less, because for water, we don't have to change the meter. We just have to remove the antenna that communicates.
It's a little module.
That's why the cost was less. For water,
And people
we're
are okay
electric,
with
we actually have to buy a new meter.
Okay.
That's why that charge is higher for electric.
Yeah.
So
It sits on top of the meter.
Yeah, it's like a little
Correct.
black box. So the people who exercise this option, they're okay with the transmitter being on there. You just basically deactivate it. And because the meter, you have to unplug the whole meter, put in a
The electric
different one.
meter.
Yeah, the electric
Yeah.
meter
The water meter, there's another communicator that sits on
Yeah.
top of it,
that's soldered in, and they're okay with just deactivating it. Okay.
but we're not okay with that,
Yeah,
though,
right,
because
yeah.
it costs manpower, inaccuracy.
Yeah, but they can read
They-
it from the street. They don't
Yeah.
have to go back to the backyard and fight the dogs.
You can, for the ones that
For the
are,
ones that opt out,
that
right?
are, yeah,
Right. Okay.
but it's still labor.
No.
Yeah. I think it should be the same. I personally think it should be the same as electric, but that's your,
Well,
I would agree.
As a, not as a recuperating our costs, but as a deterrent. That's what we're saying.
Are you talking about the
the
initial?
initial,
the initial.
just the initial.
Yeah,
Make them both.
we want them to use the meter. We
Yeah.
want them to use the communicator, so
Yeah. I
maybe
mean,
feel
it's a-
bad.
It's a disadvantage for the customer.
Right.
because That leak detection is,
That's
we're
crucial.
100% there, but we're getting
Right.
there. And that's-
That's crucial for
people
us.
Have $700 bills
Right.
and they're not happy about it.
Yeah, and there's a reason
This
why.
is a very easy way to detect.
That's correct.
So are we
Right on.
changing that to 80, matching?
I
with the
think there's
electric?
consensus.
Okay, so the three fees that we have that we're changing is we are separating out the reconnection of service at full for electric utility. We're going to have 140 for non-payment, 250 for a violation, and then we're increasing the 200 to 1,000 for title meters and meter equipment within the city, and that is also for meter tampering.
So
Section 11.
500, do we go from 5 to 1,000?
It's going to be 1,000. It was originally 223, and now it's going to be 1,000.
Yeah.
And then the third one is that one we were just discussing, the 5
Initial.
for water, and that's going to actually that one. No, any water utility customer made it left to utilize a non-communicating water, that'll be $80. So
And take out bucket truck for the,
Take out the bucket truck.
from water department.
got it. So we will bring these corrections back, and we would like to ask for consensus on the fee changes then for fiscal year 24.
We have consensus.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Very
very
well, very well. Like I said, this is the first year that the budget has actually made sense and I'm not threatened by it. And I appreciate that
Except
from all the staff members. What?
bucket truck really threw us off.
I'm gonna wait until there's a water emergency. We only had a bucket truck.
That's like putting a street sweeper in the IT department. What?
So we're going to transition now then to the
Does anyone
Stantec.
take a minute, right?
Yeah.
Let's say we're gonna take a
1 minute?
a few minutes until I get back. How's that?
That works.
She would like me to unmute.
There you are, Madam Mayor. It is
Oh.
7:31 and we are reconvened.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. It's 7:31 and we are now going for, the lights are not working right. We gotta fix them. Schedule of fees and charges for services, correct? Schedule of fees.
We just covered that. We're going to the Stantec Mall.
Oh,
David?
all right, the stand.
David, do you want to share your screen?
He's up.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. Dave Hyder with Stantec. And I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
Coming through. Okay, great. All right. Well, this evening I have some additional electric fund scenarios that we wanted to step through. These scenarios were developed working with the city staff, but after we go through the scenarios, or we can stop at any point and I can pull up the model and we can look at some additional live scenarios. So just to start off real quick in terms of recap from last time, some of the assumptions and the inputs, we are using the actual results from fiscal year 22. You did have a negative cash balance within the utility at that point in time. That was due to the run up in natural gas prices in 22. So you had a shortfall in the PCA of about 5.4 million. But fortunately in fiscal year 23, we've turned the corner and we are estimating you're going to have a surplus with a positive cash balance of about 6.3 million. And there'll be the funding of the stabilization reserve for the PCA. Your purchase power cost remained a significant portion of your total cost, about 49%. And then when we look at the forecast period, we are assuming some future capital, looking about $34.1 million for the continued SHRIP projects, which would be in 26 through 28. And we're assuming that you'd need to do some borrowing for that. So the first panel that I'll bring up here is just a recap of last time in terms of what we're looking at. So a number of things I've highlighted. We did talk about the fact that you haven't had a negative cash balance in 22, but we are forecasting based on estimated actuals that you'll be at about 6.3 in positive cash flows in 23, so that'll bring up your balance. What we were initially recommending is an 8% increase in the base rates in fiscal year 24. So that'd be the base rate increase in commercial, and then commercial demand. That would equate to, for your typical customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, that would be about a $6.36 cent per month increase. And the primary reason we're recommending doing that is to continue to build up some cash balance within the working capital fund to where we would like to get to that target of 6 months, which would be consistent with your policy. One of the items that we talked about last week was the fact that the budget that we're using for fiscal year 24 does include a number of cuts. And within this forecast model, while we are including inflation, so we are adding escalation factors on that fiscal year 24 budget to forecast for 25 and 26 and 27 throughout the period, we're not adding back those positions. And so we've run some scenarios to look at adding back those positions, some different base rate adjustments. And the first scenario I have here is just to kind of baseline it to say, well, what happens if we don't do any increases? So no increases in the demand charges. And what are the results that we see? And obviously it's not a pretty picture. Very low cash. You basically would be able to maintain about where you are right now. But then by about fiscal year 31, we're showing that you'd actually run out of cash in the working capital fund. Limited cash would make it difficult to do the borrowing in the future to fund those SHRIP projects. But I did want to mention that we are adding in the 3 positions that were removed from the 24 budget. So that would add back about $392,000. And those additions come back in fiscal year 24. No other additions in this scenario. So the next scenario is essentially, what if we just do 5% increases in the base rates? So 5% 24, 5% 25. That would equate to in fiscal year 24 about $4 per month in the typical customer's bill. We are adding in those positions, so 392,000 added back in. And what this trajectory would show us is that over a fairly long period of time, it'd take us about 6 years, assuming the forecasts are accurate, till we would meet that 6-month target. So a fairly long period of time to reach that. So scenario 3 basically applies the increases in the demand charges that we had talked about in our original scenario, the 8 and the 5. So again, $636 per month in terms of a typical customer's bill, but this now adds in those positions back in fiscal year 24. And what we see is we are able to meet that target basically in the same time frame as what our baseline scenario was. We were a little bit above it before, but now we're basically just meeting that target by fiscal year 27. And then the final scenario that I have is one that working with staff, we came up with just to look at a different setup here. And this would be a base rate increase in fiscal year 24 of that 8%. And then we would take basically a step down about 1.5% per year, continue to increase the base rate, but doing that over a 4-year period. And what this projection would show would be adding in the fiscal year 24 positions, the 392, but then in fiscal year 25, basically bringing back all of the cuts that were cut from the budget in 24. So you'd essentially be at adding back about $3.5 million. What that would allow us to do with those additional costs and those additional base rate increases, we would meet our target by fiscal year 28. So there'd be a little bit of a delay. But talking with staff, one of the items that could be done under this type of scenario would be to set aside funds from the positive cash flows that are occurring in 24, 25, and 26 to build up some type of storm resiliency fund. So you'd have $3 million in that fund by fiscal year 26. And then the last 2 slides are just from the prior presentation, just showing if you did an 8% base rate increase, that'd take you from the 110 to 117, which is still well below FPL, and other electric utilities. And then if you did the 1,200, it would be $137 going up from that with the base rate increase. So with that, I would be happy to pull up the model and take any questions.
Mr. McBoyd?
Yeah, I appreciate the different scenarios and helping us see the implications of them. I had also requested at the last meeting that we look at the last, I think I requested, or maybe Commissioner Stokes did, or maybe we both did, I don't remember, but there was a request to see what this type of analysis looked like in previous years. Was that? Yeah. And I just made myself a little table of trying to look at where we were in the past 3 years compared to where we are now, and recognizing that there've been a number of things that changed, but I'm wondering whether we don't have the benefit of the table of these, and we just got these this after for this meeting. But what I was finding, and maybe Mr. Hyder can confirm if I'm off base on something, but in 2021, we were not suggesting a need for a change to the rates. In 2022, we suggested going up by 1.7. In 2023, we suggested by going up by 3.5. Looking at the reserves for 3 now, and we've changed our idea on reserves, but in 21 and 22, we were looking at a 3-month reserve, and we were okay both in 21 and 22. In 23, we were talking more about a 6-month reserve, And we were not quite there, but we were headed toward it. And then looking at the working capital fund, so basically the rate increases that we were proposing those past years were quite a bit less. And looking at, I then looked at the working capital fund graph. And I don't know what the right way to do it, but for 21, I looked at, did I switch this? Yeah, I think I switched. That should be the other way. And 25. I looked at the current year capital and the next year, which would have been predicted. And so for 21, and it seems like we've been moving downward. In 21, we were about 25 million working capital, then in 22, about 13, and I'm estimating off the graph. About 17 in 23, it was a little better, and now we're at about 10. And then you could look at the prediction for the following year, and those are somewhat similar. The pattern is a little bit different, but similar, that we've basically been decreasing. And I'm trying to sort of understand how that all fits together. I understand that the PCA, we had a big bump that was not predictable or predicted, not predictable, that's the relevant thing, with the natural gas spike. But we've kind of dealt with that with the PCA adjustments. So I'm curious why we're at such a big jump in the base rate at this point. And like I say, my table I assembled on the fly just now, and won't swear that it's 100% right, but I think it's what I pulled off of the previous years to try to understand, what are we doing different this year from what we were doing other years. And seems to me, any commentary you have on that, any errors you noticed in my numbers are welcome. I think they're accurate off of what I saw, but I'm thinking so it doesn't necessarily make it.
Well, has everything gone up that we have to raise? All right, was that a question from Mr. Dave?
I guess any commentary you might have
Sure.
on,
Yeah, I can. Sure.
So if we don't have any weirdnesses like a big jump in a fuel price, we would expect sort of a roughly inflationary increase, maybe 3 to 5% each year. And whether we actually change our rates that year, you might have that you missed a year and didn't change your rate. So the next year you might have a bigger bump. But that's where I'm trying to understand what we're doing in that bigger context.
Mhm. Yeah, it's difficult for me to go back too far. I think the numbers you've outlined sound pretty accurate. The reality is that at one point, yeah, we were recommending, I think it was close to a 2% increase in the base rates, and then obviously that didn't happen. And then last year we were recommending the 3.25, which again didn't happen. And so some of that is just cumulative in terms of the base rates haven't been increased for a number of years. And so what we're seeing is without the fluctuations in the PCA, and that did cause some, I would say, some significant noise happening in 2022, where you had the negative, and then, you're basically recouping that negative in 23. So that's bringing you positive. We're recommending a higher increase in 24 to kind of make up for the fact that the base rates haven't been increased, and also to try to get to that policy level where we're having more cash within the working capital fund. Because if the reality is that your base costs and your base rates are fairly close aligned, but we're not generating those cash flows we need to bring us up to that balance, so that we have some cushion in terms of if there is some event that I know you don't like to talk about, or something of that sort happens. I think it's really prudent to have those funds. Yeah. And so there's been a lot of changes, as you mentioned, in terms of the structure. And I think the utility in terms of its forecasting is getting better and better each year. But that's kind of my perspective on it.
Well, we assume Stantec is getting better and better every year.
Okay, Mrs. Malega.
Thank you. So Dave, I have a question for you. I'm looking at the projected FY 2023.
What number are you at? Where?
I'm on the other little, this one, the second one. That says FY 2023 in the corner, yellow.
Yep.
Yep. So on page, if we flip it over, I just folded it in half, so I've got 23 over 22. So last year, at a 3.5% increase, the average 1,000 kilowatt per hour would have been $136.95. And that was with a 3.5% increase. But this year, I'm looking at numbers that say 8% is going to put me at 117.24. So we're still $19 and change cheaper.
That's
If
correct.
we do this increase, even though the 8%, that 8% is a big number, than 3.5 last year. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah. So that,
Figure out the math.
The PCA.
sure. It's the
No.
PCA. Yeah. So the,
Because on the bottom, it's got the PCA is at negative, it's got negative 10% on 2023.
right. And that was reflecting the reduction that was gonna happen because you'd increased it to the level where it needed to be to recover those increased costs, but then you had to bring it down because you were effectively over collecting once that you had made that adjustment. And so the yeah, the reality is that the current customer's bill, excuse me, with the PCA is $110. And so it did come down substantially during when you made the adjustment in June of 2023. So this past June, the bill got reduced down to 110. So it was at the 130, it got reduced down to 110. And now assuming the PCA, it's difficult for us to forecast the PCA, but assuming it doesn't change in 24, and I can't say that that's necessarily the case, but going from where the bill is today with the adjustment in the demand charge, I would go to 117.
Okay, so my brings me to my question, on that 2023 FY 2023 under PCA, you guys have predicted a 9.14% increase for 2026. But yet when I look at the number of today, that number has changed to 2.23.
Right, and that's given purchase power cost forecasts, which change, essentially on a monthly basis.
I'm sorry, it went from 9.14, I'm sorry, to 10.27. So you're thinking that in 2026, we're going to have another 10% increase on the PCA? Is that your prediction?
I think there's a chance, but I wouldn't wager a lot of money on that because of the difficulty in forecasting power costs that far into the future.
I just feel like this is all a guessing game. I hate to say it. I'm looking at these numbers here. They've literally the percentages have jumped tremendously.
I have to say that I hadn't looked at the monthly bill for the FY 2023 versus I'm looking at the first. It does seem, it's a good thing that the current bill is a lot lower.
But he's saying that because that included the PCA is what he's saying.
But didn't we drop the PCA? The most recent drop was about $7-8. It wasn't
No.
$20.
No, we did like 7 and then we did another 20 some.
Oh, we did two. That's
Yeah.
right. One of them was about 7, but the next was
Right.
bigger. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm reflecting back as a resident, listening to these conversations, and I just want to make sure that we're being completely transparent, and I don't want to have this conversation a year from now again.
Mhm.
And those numbers be completely not misrepresented, but skewed greatly. Because right now, if we look at year over year, what we've been presented has been all over the map. So it really, to me, just does feel like a guessing game on what we're going to do.
Well, I think the PCA is a guessing game.
Commissioner Stokes? Thank you.
Yeah, when I look at this, I largely ignore year 2023 because of the PCA and how much that shot up. And the PCA is definitely a guessing game. But when you go back to before that giant leap, I think this is some of the stuff that the vice mayor was saying. The packet for 2021, when we were here, the scenario here says no increase between 2020 and beyond, no increase. And we end up in the year 23 with $25 million in our reserves. So that
It's all
is,
just, it's
but
every
that-
year it changes.
it shouldn't be that far off. Like the variability in the PCA, I feel like shouldn't cause that big of a jump, because when the fuel cost went up, so did our rates. When the fuel cost went down, so did our rates. So
And that's,
our base rate should be predictable. We know how much money we're going to borrow. We're planning for how much money we're going to borrow. We're planning for 3% escalator. So maybe it's more like 5, but to be off $19 million.
I mean, are we using that much more of our working capital for capital improvement that we're not? I mean, it doesn't, the numbers are just year over year, they're staggering.
and the PCA, in theory, we keep being told, and I think that's the it's a pass-through.
Right. It should,
So it shouldn't really have much effect on the working capital. It might have a
Madam
dent
Mayor?
for a while, but it should. I mean, the prediction from 21 that we would be 25 million, and we're closer to 10 million now. That does seem a fair ways off.
Okay, Commissioner, no, you're the city manager.
City manager.
Commissioner,
You can have it.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to point out, we do have a chart that might lend to the conversation that you're having right now. This was a diagram that we put together at the suggestion of Vice Mayor, and I think this might be helpful with this conversation that we're having. So it gives you over time a comparison of monthly bills from December 2021 to current. So it might give you a picture of how the PCA and the bill, the energy costs, PCA taxes, and the change over time.
So I may, for the
What you're
record,
saying, sound like this will help a little bit.
uh, this data was put together at the suggestion of the vice mayor this morning. It was assembled by Leidos, and Craig Shepard is on the phone.
Thank you.
The way to interpret this data, and Craig can chime in, is a history of our rates starting in December, where we were in December of 21, all the way through to where we are today. And the last bar on the right is our friends across the street. And you can see how the rates went up in January of 22, went up again in June of 22, took a significant jump in September of 22, then started to come down in May and then in June. And where we are today. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Where we are today, which is the June bill. And that is the that comparison, by the way. Craig, I have to explain. Does that include the taxes, Craig? I think it does.
it's got the orange. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
we don't have 120 on our paper.
Right. So this is on 1,000 kilowatt hour customer. The bill is $120. And then we have the neighboring bill. And then the October 23 column is Craig showing, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, what the bill would be if we go up by 8%. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the 8%. And you'll see that the energy charge and the customer charge are what's going up. The PCA and the taxes are about the same. So it's about a $6 or $7 increase. Yeah, so the taxes are broken out separately, but you can see that without the taxes, right now it's about 110. So with the taxes, about 120. And if you look at the last column, FP&L, that actually includes taxes and their franchise fee. So
Is that October also?
that is right now, yes. Well, that is, right now, that's what
That's
Hours in there.
a July bill.
right. And we know they're going up again in January on their base rates.
Okay.
And customer,
Mr. Stokes has her light on,
He was first.
but Mr. Diaz, light on first.
Yeah, and just to clarify, knowing how our neighbors, as Ed likes to say it, is how they operate their rates. Their bar on this graph can basically be copied and pasted. It's consistent. They're not changing their rate like we are. So for most of these other months, their bar basically looks the same until they increase it, which is coming up soon.
They generally change once or twice a year. They did get a base rate approval, increase approved for 4 consecutive years. So they have at least, I believe, 2, maybe 3 more years to go on their base rate increases. They've also had PCA increases just as we did. They've had to recover their PCA over a much longer period of time. They've made some adjustments to their, I believe, to their 2023 expected fuel costs, but the costs that they incurred in 2022, I believe they're recovering those over, not 100% sure on this. I believe it's about a 23-month period. They stretched it out. So their rates will be a little bit high for a while.
Yeah.
They don't move drastically, other than, of course, the PCA, the big PCA numbers, which they hit, and they have a storm charge in there as well. They're recovering for their storm expenses.
So eventually, the rate, PCA on their end as well goes wild like ours, but eventually they're going to collect it, if you will.
They will,
and they just wait a little bit longer than we do. Okay.
Correct. And I think I just want to correct something too, that if the PCA happens to be negative at the end of the fiscal year, it does show up in that end of year fund balance working capital number, because it's a big negative hit to which we were at the end of September. We were significantly negative on the PCA. We've since recovered and gone all the way to $3 million, to the good. So we recovered from that negative position at the end of fiscal 22.
Thank you. Commissioner Stokes.
Yeah, I guess the confusing part is when we look at the year 2021 graph that we've been given. In 21, the bar is that big orange box covering the axis, but it looks like it's that 20 million. So in
Which graph are you looking at?
2021, I'm looking at the working capital. So in 2021, we had over 20 million, and then we lost it all, and then we got it back. And I think, is our bond money included in that? Like, why? Because we recovered the loss from our PCA. So I would think, unless the bond money that we're spending on SHRIP or something is included, that we would have, our bar should be the same as it was pre the whole crazy PCA thing. And now, because we recovered it.
David, this is at Liberty. Do you want to answer that question, or would you like me to take a shot at it?
Well, I can take a shot. So I think you're talking about the one, it has FY 2020 in yellow up at the top. I'm sorry, FY 21.
Yeah. Yes.
So at the time when that was completed, the only thing we knew for certain was what the ending balance was in 2019.
That's not up on the screen.
No,
Okay.
it's on our hand.
Well, I know, but do we have a
I can,
slide?
Yep.
So we have over $10 million in our account at the end of 2019.
Yep.
And without any rate increases, we were projected to continue growing that.
Right. Yep. With revenues just slightly above expenditures, and we figured it would turn at some point. But the reality is that the next year, the balance wasn't growing. The expenditures and revenues, revenues were not above the expenditures, and therefore these cash balances didn't occur. We were also anticipating, and I think one of the big undertakings was the initial borrowing that was going to happen in the next year for the SHRIP. You can see this was prior to any of that borrowing. And so that has had some impact in terms of the cash flows. But I don't want to be misconstrued that any of these bars here are actuals in terms of, where cash was at the end of fiscal year 2020. That was just a forecast at that time.
So 19 was the actual.
19 was the actual. It was about 10 million. And the other thing I wanted to point out was that the PCA wasn't put in place until last year. And so any adjustments that happened in terms of purchase power cost were, reflected and had to be made up in the revenues, and they power cost have gone up, and that was a result of, cash flows year over year.
But the PCA was incorporated into it just wasn't split out.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's right.
But we recovered all that money and then made more.
Well, you did by the time we got, now if we roll it forward to where you have the PCA, you did in 2023, you recovered the money that you'd lost, but adjustments didn't happen during 2020, 21 until you had in 2022 when you had the PCA.
So if we started in, let's say 19 is over a little over 10 million, and then those other years stuff was going up and down and the kind of net zeroed with the PCA over that time, but then we over recovered. Shouldn't we be above 10 million now?
No, because you recovered the shortfall in 2022 and brought you back positive, but that's not saying that the balances, that happened in 2020 and 21, it didn't stay at that, we didn't build up those cash balances. And I would have to do a little bit of reconnaissance to look back and see exactly what happened in each of those years. But I know that the cash balances, as they played forward, it didn't build up in 2020 and 2021. They went negative, obviously, by 2022, and then you recovered.
All right. Yeah, I'll follow up a little more after this because I don't want to
Yep.
hear all night. But the last question was looking at this other segmented bar graph. So when you look at the bottom, our customer service charges have been pretty consistent. Those haven't changed. We know the blue PCA is going up and down all over the place. And then when you look at the energy in December of 21, it jumped in 22, but then it stayed for those months, it stayed relatively flat until now. There's a jump in that purple bar, which is supposed to be our more predictable, stable thing. So is that due to inflation? And then also like the other thing that I realized was looking at, we now have a debt service that we have to pay for the borrowing that we did. So is that what's accounting for the jump in the purple bar between June of 23 and October 23?
I think the jump, that's a question.
McBoy?
I think the jump is
Mr.
the
McBoy,
8%.
let's have him answer the question.
Well, I think that's he doesn't have this in front of him, I don't think. The jump, the purple, isn't that the predicted 8% increase? Because that's for October.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out what's accounting for that jump. Like we would need that increase if our cost increase in the base rate. So it was flat for a while, and now we're in the base rate. We need this jump. Right. I'm still not clear what's driving that.
I can address that.
Okay.
So if we don't do, so essentially